Alright guys, super excited. It's time to start this build. Let's jump right into it. Alright guys, we got all our wood out here. What we're going to do is start with the base of the tent. We'll build the base and then we'll build the top piece around the base. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this piece of plywood. Now we're going to keep it at 48 inches, so we're not going to touch the width, but we are going to bring the length down to 83 inches. So let's do that. Alright, we have our plywood cut to size. It's time to cut down our 1x4s. It's at this point in the build where you're going to want to establish which end is going to be the front and the rear. It doesn't matter, just pick a side and actually write in on the wood which end is front and rear. The reason for that is because we're going to be building the front just slightly different than the back side. We're getting ready to cut our 1x4s down to size. I want to show you how I'm getting my measurements, and I also want to show you how I have these corners configured. Alright, the first thing I want to mention is I'm getting all my measurements with the front and the back 1x4s being sandwiching the side 1x4s. So the front and the rear will always be covering the end grain of the side boards, just like this. So if you don't have your 1x4s configured like this, our measurements will definitely be different. I want to show you why we're using two 1x4s on each side and how I have these configured. Now the most important thing is this step up right here. Around the side and the back, this step up has to be here. I'll show you what we have going on. If we slide these back, you can see that the inside 1x4s are sitting on top of the plywood, and the outside will sit in front of it. And we'll create this step up. The reason for this step up, there's two different reasons. The first reason is that this is these sides here and here is where the material of the tent will be mounted to. And then also this step up creates the weather seal. So the top of the tent sits down in here, and that seal lays across here and here and keeps your tent waterproof. Now I mentioned that the front and the back are configured a little bit differently. The only difference between the front and the rear 1x4s is that on the front, both 1x4s will be mounted below the plywood. Nothing will be sitting on top in the front. So these will come up here and here. The reason we need to keep this flat is because this is where the hinge of the tent will be mounted. Where is it? Alright, now that we have our 1x4s cut down to size, I want to mention something before we permanently attach them to the plywood. When we go to attach the outside 1x4 to the inside, the distance here and here needs to be 3/4 of an inch. When you drop the outside 1x4 down 3/4 of an inch, it leaves you with a 1/4 of an inch overhang here at the bottom. Now if this overhang doesn't bother you at all, don't worry about it at all, it's not a big deal. But if it does and you have a table saw, you can go ahead and rip this outside 1x4 down 1/4 of an inch, and then you'll be flush with the bottom of the plywood. Alright, I just finished up trimming my 1x4 so they'd be flush with the bottom of the plywood. The next thing we're going to do is attach the 1x4s to the plywood, starting with the inside 1x4s. What I'm going to do is flip the plywood upside down and do all my drilling and countersinking up top. That way I won't have to get underneath and try to drill it from below. When we go to join two pieces of wood, we're always going to do several things. We're going to drill pilot holes and countersink. This will keep us from cracking our wood when we go to screw in the screws. We're going to also use screws in conjunction with wood glue. The screws will give the wood glue that clamping effect that'll give us a really, really strong bond. Definitely need to do all three. Alright, we're at the front of the tent. This is the side that we're doing a little differently than the other three. Instead of the 1x4 sitting on top of the plywood, it'll sit against the end grain. So we'll have it right here, and we'll do our pilot holes horizontally into the end grain here. Alright, we're almost done with this bottom half. All we have left to do is to put on the outside 1x4s. I trimmed mine to be flush with the bottom of the plywood, but when you go to put these on, just remember to leave yourself 3/4 of an inch right here. Remember that. We're basically just going to glue this 1x4 on. You can clamp it and glue it if you want to, but you can also put screws through the back. Last 1x4 to put on. The next thing we're going to do is round off all 4 corners. This isn't a necessary step. It kind of just depends on the look you're going for, but I think it looks really nice having the, you know, nice rounded edge. So what we're going to do is flip the base upside down, and I'll show you how to round off these corners. The first thing we're going to do is remove any screws that might be in our way. We're going to end up cutting around through here. So we're going to want to take these screws out. If you have any cracks or gaps, don't worry about any of that. We'll get to that later on. We'll eventually fill those, so don't worry about those right now. So what I like to do here is a series of straight cuts across here to take away this material, and then take the belt sander and then shape your curve. Now that we have a pretty good curve, I'll take the belt sander and shape this into a nicer, clean, smooth curve. Alright, we flipped the base back upright. Now we're gonna, since we cut this curve out, we're gonna cut a little bit of curve out off this top edge. That's pretty much it. You're just gonna do that on all four corners. And I think that looks really nice. We're going to fill all these gaps later on.
Now that's about it for the bottom half of this tent, and this is where I'm going to wrap up this video. In part 2 of this build, we're going to start working on the top half of the tent. So be sure to look for that. I'll link it in the video or in the description below. But I hope these videos have been helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and thanks for watching.